When I first delved into the theory of the flat Earth many years ago, and later began drafting the outlines of this book in the year 2016, taking that theory as an example of how minds can be manipulated and lulled into submission, I neglected to explain the 4 seasons according to the flat Earth model. I assumed that understanding the movement of the sun within this model would, by itself, clarify the succession of seasons, an explanation I thought unnecessary. Yet, I soon discovered that the phenomenon of seasonal change within the flat Earth framework poses a dilemma for some, particularly for those who have not studied the matter deeply, while others went so far as to consider it proof of the Earth's sphericity. Hence, it may be worthwhile to address this phenomenon, linking it to the movement of celestial bodies within the great firmament, to the relationship between the seasons and the Zodiac, and even to the elusive notion of the sweeping maiden. Let us revisit the flat model and the sun's motion above it. According to this conception, what we call the North Pole represents the Earth's center, while what we call the South Pole marks the outermost edges. Beyond the encircling ice lies an unknown realm, perhaps other lands, perhaps other suns revolving by some hidden mechanism. On our Earth, however, the sun circles above in a clockwise path. Incidentally, this explains why one returns to the starting point after attempting to circumnavigate the Earth. The traveler is not revolving around a sphere, but moving east to west or west to east in a circular orbit aligned with the sun. Thus, he eventually arrives back where he began, not because the Earth is a globe, but because his path is a horizontal circle. This is evidenced by the fact that none of the adventurers who attempted such voyages ever ventured vertically across the Earth, for the simple reason that such a journey is impossible. The sun, then, revolves in a horizontal circle like the hands of a clock, yet not along a fixed orbit. Rather, its path narrows to the Tropic of Cancer and expands to the Tropic of Capricorn throughout the year. This shifting orbit brings about the solstices of summer and winter, and the equinoxes of spring and autumn, in other words, the cycle of the 4 seasons. Let us begin to portray the scene when the sun reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, the widest arc of its path. At this point, the outer lands, those lying beneath the equator, enter their summer, for the sun stands directly above them, while the inner lands, those above the equator, are cast into winter, distant from the sun's zenith. As the sun continues its course, its orbit narrows day by day, and within 3 months it returns to hover above the equator. This marks the autumnal equinox for the outer lands, where the waning warmth ushers in autumn, even as the inner lands receive the vernal equinox, with the sun drawing nearer, kindling a gentle rise in warmth and summoning spring. The orbit contracts further, and after another 3 months the sun arrives at the Tropic of Cancer, the narrowest circle of its passage. For the outer lands, this is the winter solstice, when the sun recedes far from them and winter descends. Yet above the inner lands the sun now stands, declaring the summer solstice and the birth of summer. Thus, in the span of 6 months, winter transforms into summer, and summer yields to winter. Then the sun reverses its journey outward, taking 3 months to return to the equator. As it withdraws from the inner lands, autumn falls upon them. As it approaches the outer lands, spring awakens there. Day by day the sun continues, and after another 3 months it reaches once more the circle from which we began our vision, where summer graces the outer lands below the equator and winter rules the inner lands above it. But how, then, does the sun pass through the circles of the Zodiac? As we clarified in earlier chapters, within the flat Earth paradigm there exists no space in the sense portrayed by NASA, no boundless cosmos, no trillions of galaxies, planets, and stars. So what, then, are those luminous specks scattered across the night sky? Of course, they are stars, but not colossal masses of nuclear fire orbited by planets and moons. Rather, They are points of light revolving within the great firmament, that jeweled canopy stretched above our Earth. To grasp the nature of this firmament, let us return to the analogy of the clock. The clock has a fixed dial, the Earth upon which we dwell, while two hands sweep above it in their own distinct circuits, the sun and the moon. Above them lies the glass, representing a star-studded canopy. This is the great firmament, moving in its own course, independent of both sun and moon. The stars upon this firmament sometimes form recognizable patterns, known to us as the constellations of the Zodiac. These patterns never change, but revolve in harmony with the firmament itself. Thus, as the sun shifts throughout the year between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, it aligns in turn with each of these constellations, appearing to the observer as though entering their domains. Returning to our earlier model of the seasons, when the sun stands above the Tropic of Capricorn, it aligns with the constellation of Capricorn, the namesake of that orbit. For nearly a month, from December 22nd until January 19th, it remains in conjunction with this sign. Hence, those born between these dates are called children of Capricorn. As the sun continues its circuit over the Earth, it moves into a narrower orbit and aligns for about a month with Aquarius, from January 20th to February 18th. In this way, over 6 months, the sun passes through 7 constellations. After Aquarius comes Pisces, then Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and finally Cancer, the namesake of the narrowest orbit. When the sun reverses its path outward, it aligns successively with Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and ultimately returns to Capricorn, where our journey began. Note that the constellation always precedes the sun. Thus, when the sun's course reverses after 6 months, it aligns with a constellation positioned on the opposite side of its path. Once again, let us concede that this model is not correct and return to the spherical Earth model, in order to pose once more the question we raised earlier and see which of the two proves more logically sound. If the Earth is indeed a sphere revolving upon its axis and around the sun, while the entire solar system itself revolves around the galactic axis, and the galaxy hurtles through the vast expanse of space at speeds approaching that of light, then why is it that the constellations since ancient times have remained fixed in their patterns, their positions unaltered, their celestial dance traced in flawless circles? Were we truly within such a system of ceaseless motion, 4 distinct types of movement interwoven, the stars could not possibly remain fixed. Their rotations would alter, their circles distort, their positions scatter. But if the Earth is flat and unmoving, while the stars and constellations turn above upon the great firmament, then what we witness with our own eyes, the unchanging celestial dome revolving with steady rhythm since time immemorial. Let us attempt to render the matter visually in the simplest way possible. Imagine now only the Earth and the sun. We set the Earth spinning upon its axis, and we place the camera as the eye of an observer in Egypt, for instance. Note that here the Earth alone is rotating on its axis. Thus the observer stands within a system moving by a single motion. In this case, the pattern of the star's rotation appears fixed in perfect circles, precisely as we perceive them in our daily lives. Now let the Earth revolve around the sun, and give the sun itself a small orbit, as though it were circling the galactic axis. This introduces 3 kinds of motion. For simplicity, we shall ignore the 4th, the movement of the galaxy itself, and likewise disregard the motion of the stars, treating them as though they were fixed. Let us now look through the eye of the observer at the heart of a system propelled by 3 kinds of motion, and see how the stars would appear to turn in the sky. Such, indeed, is how the heavens should look to us if we truly dwelt at the center of this moving system. Yet in reality we behold the stars wheeling across the celestial dome from time immemorial, their patterns steady and unchanged. This great and unyielding dance seems more naturally explained by the turning of the vast celestial sphere. Is this not what our own eyes witness, or do our eyes deceive us? Yet there is an important observation often cited as evidence for the Earth's sphericity. Suppose you live in Egypt, for instance, and have a friend in South Africa. Though the two lands lie nearly along the same meridian, sharing a similar time, when you gaze upon Aquarius at night, you see it in one orientation, while your friend perceives it differently. The stars, it seems, appear dissimilar between the northern and southern hemispheres. That is to say, the appearance of the stars differs between the northern and southern hemispheres, and the same holds true for the moon as well. Surely a sign that we dwell upon the surface of a sphere, is it not? In truth, however, such variations in appearance are perfectly consistent with the flat Earth model. Let us take, for instance, this triangle suspended in the sky. This is how an observer in Egypt would perceive it, while an observer in South Africa would inevitably see it differently, owing to the change in viewing angle. The same principle applies to the stars and constellations, as well as to the moon itself. And by the way, the programs we use to create these simulations are open source. You can download them freely from the links provided in the description box and use them to conduct your own simulations. Well then, do you not see that the flat Earth model explains the succession of the 4 seasons, as well as the motion of stars and constellations, with greater coherence than the spherical one? The Sun, being small and close to the Earth, exerts an influence on temperature that is both direct and palpable. But if, as the Copernican model claims, the Sun is unimaginably vast and unimaginably distant, how could a mere tilt of the Earth's axis, 23.5 degrees, account for such drastic variations in climate between the two hemispheres? Is it reasonable that so slight an inclination of so small a planet could dictate the influence of so colossal a star at such an unfathomable distance? A star of that magnitude ought to bathe the entire globe in uniform heat, leaving little room for the stark contrasts in temperature and the astonishing diversity of ecosystems between north and south. By the same measure, how could a star so large and so far away scorch the equatorial lands with such intensity, while its warmth diminishes almost entirely at the poles? Speaking of the poles, there is one phenomenon invoked by advocates of the spherical model that would, if true, utterly dismantle the flat Earth framework, the midnight sun. This occurs in the Arctic when the inner lands, those north of the equator, are in summer, and the sun never sets upon the North Pole. For 6 months, from March 20th until September 23rd, the sun circles the horizon without sinking into night. The same is said to happen in the Antarctic when the outer lands, those south of the equator, enter their summer. In the north, the phenomenon poses no difficulty. Both the spherical and the flat Earth models can account for it logically. If the Earth is a globe, its axial tilt brings the northern hemisphere closer to the sun as it passes over the Tropic of Cancer, keeping it above the horizon at high latitudes. If the Earth is flat, the sun's circular path above the Tropic of Cancer likewise keeps it near the Arctic Circle, shining continuously. As we have said, both models explain the northern midnight Sunday. The dilemma arises in the southern hemisphere, in Antarctica. The globe model interprets the event in the same way. The axial tilt brings the southern hemisphere nearer to the sun as it circles above the Tropic of Capricorn, holding it aloft for months without setting. A perfectly consistent explanation. Yet within the flat Earth model, such a phenomenon becomes impossible. How could the sun illuminate so vast an expanse of the southern extremities for 24 hours a day without casting its light across the entire Earth? On this reasoning, the flat Earth model collapses, unless the phenomenon occurs only in the north and not at all in the south. In that case, the footage claiming to capture a southern midnight sun will be mere fabrication, film in the north instead. Ice is ice. It is indistinguishable, and the Antarctic itself is forbidden ground, inaccessible to the public under the Antarctic Treaty System to which we have already alluded. Finally, let us conclude this chapter with the al-Jawār al-Kunnas, the sweeping wanderers, by which God swore when he said, "So I swear by the retreating ones, by those that run and conceal themselves." They remained an enigma for exegetes for a long time, until some commentators explained them through the scientific vision of the cosmos, identifying them with black holes. In that reading, they are Kunnas, hidden, because their stupendous gravity draws an even light, rendering them invisible. They course through space and devour planets and stars. That may be a plausible interpretation, yet an ordinary life sweeping is not performed on things of value, but on waste and refuse. Have we ever heard of someone sweeping up gold or banknotes? Of course not. We sweep only rubbish. So are planets, stars, and moons the refuse of the heavens? This thought invites another explanation. Do you recall the invisible bodies we referred to earlier when speaking of the sea of the heavens? We noted then that the sea of the earth is linked to the sea of the heavens, evidenced by springs and river sources that burst from the high mountains. If the two seas meet, perhaps detritus passes from the earthly sea into the heavenly sea, and the role of the al-Jawār al-Kunnas, those invisible bodies, is to sweep and purify the celestial sea of such waste. Strange, is it not? And have you ever heard of the phenomenon of fish raining from the sky? Investigate it and try to find a convincing explanation, for this, again, is a long subject to which we devoted a separate chapter explaining the true water cycle on Earth and the mighty Mount Calf. Do not forget that the propositions we advance are theories that may be true or may be false. Ultimate knowledge belongs to God alone. Use your reason and be persuaded by what convinces you. Above all, employ your mind in a free, unbiased inquiry without blind adherence to what scientists say as if they were divinely inspired. Do not deny the existence of an island while standing on its shore. Go and verify for yourself. Do not declare a road straight without bends when you stand merely at its outset. Do not judge without evidence and reason, for everything is learned by comparative analysis, not by following the herd whose leader we already know.